6051 to 6100. 6051. Adulteries, the love of ruling, deceit, etc. It must be described how infernal are adulteries and the other sins. For instance, in this place, adulteries, that is, believing that adulteries are allowable though there may, or may not, be adultery. Scarcely anyone, at this day, believes that they are so infernal, and that adulterers cannot possibly be saved. The reasons are, 1. Because heaven is marriage, and hell is adultery. 2. Because conjugal love descends from the marriage of good and truth, adultery from the marriage of evil and falsity. 3. Because from marriage, according to conjugal and infernal love, offspring is born. 4. That in heaven they abhor adulteries, and that therefore heaven is closed and hell opened widely, by them. 5. That a man by conjugal love receives the form of love inwardly and outwardly, by adultery the form of hell. Also, that heavenly love is implanted solely through conjugal love. 6. That conjugal love is the fundamental love of all loves, for, when man becomes a form of love, he becomes an image of the Lord, otherwise, the reverse is the case. 7. That, therefore, the delights of conjugal love exceed all other delights, both in number and quality. 8. That heavenly joy is founded upon that love in heaven. So that as far as anyone is in that, so far he is in heavenly joy of every kind and degree. 9. That by marriages, in the heavens, wisdom increases, which increase, there, is in the place of procreation. 10. That with preachers in hell, there is a doctrinal adultery, which differs from natural adultery, of which anon. 11. The reason why wisdom increases according to chastity, is because the origin thereof is the marriage of good and truth, and the marriage of the Lord with the church. This is its cause wherefore, nobody who is an adulterer can be wise in spiritual things. Hence, so far as he is an adulterer, so far is he blind in spiritual things, and so far is inwardly a devil. 12. That, hence, to love the married partner, is to do good in the sight of the Lord, for it is thus, from chastity, to love the Lord. This communicates with the heavens, and delights the souls of the angels to such an extent as cannot be believed. 13. There is also a certain kind of coition, which, when it proceeds from chastity, inasmuch as it is the effect of that love, delights heaven in the highest degree. On the contrary, it distresses them so far as it is from adultery. 14. Proofs may be brought forward, that adulterers, no matter how morally well they may have lived in other respects and have given themselves to prayers, are cast into hell. The members devoted to generation, in both sexes, correspond to the inmost or third heaven, where the angels are in the heavenly marriage, or that of good and truth, more than the rest. In a word, marriages in the heavens are most holy. Wherefore, they must not be profaned by adulteries. 6052. Nor can it be believed that the love of ruling, like adultery, also has in itself hell. All those, who are in this love, are in evils and in falsities therefrom. The reason is, because the love of ruling sinks the mind into its proprium, so that it cannot be elevated by the Lord, but everyone in whom heaven is elevated from his proprium, although the man is not sensible of it. But to describe self-love, its highest degree is the love of ruling over others. It also contains in itself the love of ruling over the divine, and this is Babel, respecting which so many abominable things are stated in the word. To describe the nature of the love of ruling, it is not ruling over others in one's official position, but desiring to rule over others outside of that, not being content with its own domain. The nature of the latter, and the nature of the former, love, might be described further, also, that all, who are in these loves, of whatsoever dignity, are cast down into hell. 6053. As regards deceit, the reason why it is execrable, is because it enters man's interiors, even to the rational, which is the inmost natural, and there tightly closes the spiritual mind, in which heaven is. The quality of such persons might be described. These three things, especially, those shun who will be of the New Jerusalem. 6054. Regarding adulteries, moreover, the reason why adulteries are so prevalent at this day, in the Christian world, is because those there are in the marriage of falsity and evil. As regards adulteries, they may be of a married man with harlots, of a man not married with another's wife, or with an undefiled virgin without the intention of taking her to wife, thus, the despoiling of virginity, or, the delight of variety. Because all this destroys the conjugial. It is not so with an unmarried man who is unable to abstain altogether, and yet, from causes in the laws, cannot enter into matrimony, if he adjoins to himself a consenting prostitute, a concubine, or a mistress. But let him beware that the conjugial, which is interior love, do not enter, unless he have the purpose of taking her to wife. The former class deprive themselves of all the delight of marriage, but not the latter. 6055. Conjugial love, continued. Those men who are in conjugial love, are in such a state that they can enjoy intercourse with their wife as often as they please. The ability never fails, inasmuch as all parts of their body are in that love and, after intercourse, they are affected with joyfulness, and never with dejection, so that they are invigorated by it. But the contrary happens with those who are in adulteries. 2. The husband's love depends on the wife's love, so far as she loves such things, so far does the husband. It is the reverse in love which is not conjugial. The reason is because the former are one, and are conjoined as to interiors. This is meant by their being not twain, but one flesh. 3. Those who are in conjugial love, feel with certainty whether there is lasciviousness or not, for all lasciviousness is of adultery, but there is nothing of lasciviousness with those who are in conjugial love. This they perceive most perfectly. That sensation is from the interior. The outward act is similar to that. Adulterers feel nothing save that which is exterior, and not anything interior. When yet all spiritual delight is in interiors, and is incomprehensible to those who are not spiritual. 4. Nobody can be in conjugial love except he be spiritual, and except he acknowledge the Lord. For the ultimate cause thereof is from the Lord's marriage with heaven, and with the church. This is its divine spiritual origin. 5. Since woman is born the affection of truth and good, and man the understanding of truth and good, it is hence manifest that they are conjoined as one, and that conjugial love constantly makes them one, and thus that they are loves, and images of the Lord. 6. The effect of conjugial love is wonderful, its power may be described. 7. There is nothing at all of lasciviousness in conjugial love, although it is outwardly similar, yet it is dissimilar inwardly. 8. I might mention many exceedingly execrable things concerning adulteries. 9. Cerberus signifies a guard to prevent the delight of conjugial love from flowing down into hell. 10. Afterwards, I might relate various other things concerning adulteries. Conjugial love produces the delights of heaven, by communication. 11. The offspring puts on the affections of the father and mother, hence, the hereditary nature is not so malignant. The love of marriage opens heaven. The love of adultery closes heaven. 6056. The apartments of houses. It is a peculiarity of the apartments of houses, resulting from their situation, that the dweller, occupant, and others, in one apartment, have a different disposition from those in another. The delights are different. So that in one apartment there is the delight of studying and discharging duty, in another, the delight of going out, in another, the delight of social interaction, and in another the delight of being in the society of one's wife. In another, the delight of eating, in another, they have close communication with those who are outside, and in others a distant one. Spirits know, as of themselves, that, if they enter such an apartment, this or that thing is possible to them. And so forth, with much variety and according to their affections. This peculiarity derives its cause chiefly from the quarters, and from the inclinations to dwell in one quarter rather than in others. Also, everyone knows his own place in the apartment, which place accords with his disposition. He proceeds to it as soon as he enters, and if another appears in that place, he goes away. It is similar in the churches. This is the case in these particulars, because the greatest form and least form in the heavens are similar, so that there is an image of heaven in the single details. 6057. God as a man. The truly human idea concerning God, is as of a God-man. That it is so, may be evident from these circumstances: 1. That everyone, in the other life, represents God to himself as a man, the good especially, but also the evil. This was investigated, in the case of many, who, in the world, entertained the idea about God as of something invisible, or as of something spiritual, as it were aerial, at a great distance before the eyes. But, still, all these same persons, in the other life, see God as a man. It was investigated and found to be so. It is because that idea is in man's spirit. There are many things in man's spirit which the man does not know are there, such as spiritual speech, the idea of space, and many others. From these facts it follows, that the idea of every single man, deeply rooted in his spirit, is of God as a man. 2. But that idea has been destroyed in the world with those who began to think of three persons, and to separate the Lord's human from them, and hence made themselves three invisible gods. 3. As is evident, also, from the idea of spirits who say that God is as it were something aerial, or nebulous, either bright or dark. 4. The former idea, is destroyed, also, with those who attribute everything to nature, and consequently nothing to the divine. These, in the spiritual world, make to themselves gods of all who excel in power, but still esteem them as men. 5. Children, the simple-minded, women, in a word all who have not destroyed that idea through the causes mentioned above, have the idea of God as of a man. 6. The same idea remains with all Gentiles, especially with Africans, who cannot conceive what a God who is not man, is. 7. That idea was held by all the ancients, before and after the times of Abraham. They saw God as a man, and called him Jehovah and Creator of the universe. 8. It existed with the Gentiles in ancient times, who acknowledged many gods, all of which were men, respecting whom see the places in the word where they are named. 9. Also, with all the Greeks and Italians. Hence the divine attributes from which their gods take their origin, all as men, Jupiter, Apollo, Venus, etc. 10. So, likewise, the inhabitants of other earths, respecting whom see my pamphlet. 354, 11, Papists, also, in that they are willing to worship the Pope, and to acknowledge divine power in him, and kiss his footprints, and in that they are willing to adore saints as gods. 12. The reason that this is so, is from the influx of heaven, which is received by every spirit, for heaven is the divine in human form, wherefore, no one can be an angel in heaven without that idea of God. On which account, the Lord is acknowledged, even by Gentiles. 6058. Every man is in his ruling love, and thus, as it were, in the center. It was asked by some, why it is that the evil, thus, those who have denied God, who keep quiet, cannot be in an angelic society. But they received reply, that every spirit at last comes to that place in which he may be, as it were, in his own center, for they who are above, below, and around him, in every direction, cause him to be in that place. For there is a communication and influx of affections. Wherefore, no one can, in the end, be anywhere else than in his own place, as it were in his center. Moreover, all angels and all spirits are centers, for the heavenly form is one of continued centers. 6059. The circumstance that among the Papists they have separated the bread and wine in the sacrament of the supper. There was a conversation about the sacrament of the supper, as to why, among the Papists, they have separated the bread and wine, and give the people the bread and drink the wine themselves. When, nevertheless, it was instituted differently by the Lord, and since this did not happen from necessity, by reason of the want of wine, inasmuch as there is wine in Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, the interior part of Germany, and Hungary, also. Where wine is not produced, as in England, Holland, Sweden, Denmark, and in the part of Germany where the Reformed are, wine does not grow, and yet it is used in the sacrament of the supper. The Papists could not tell any reason, unless the private one that the monks, when they perform masses for the souls of the dead and attend to their other duties, may not faint under their continued labor, since they are then revived by wine. No other reason could be discovered, but it was said that this thing occurred of the Lord's divine providence. Because, when they devastated the church of every good and truth, they separated the bread and the wine, because good is not good if separated from truth, it is good when in truth, nor is truth by any means truth save from good. 6060. Zinzendorf. After some time, I spoke with him, and he was, then, as if enfeebled in mind, because he was not received in the societies, where he wandered around. They refuted his doctrine by various arguments, and proved that there was nothing at all of truth in it, except that merit must not be placed in works. When it was said that neither should merit be placed in faith alone, and that those, who professed that, thereby exalted themselves over others, they do not answer. He was enfeebled in mind because his pride was humbled. He stated, that, when he entered gardens, he did not see any fruits, and that he saw the foliage, not green, but withered and yellow, when, nevertheless, others, who were with him, saw both fruits and green leaves, as in gardens. It signified that, he possessed, no truths. I spoke with one of the Moravians, who, being asked what he felt about evil works and adulteries, and also heinous sins, stated, that if they were indeed perpetrated, they admonished the offender to desist from them, but that, nevertheless, they are overlooked, because he holds their faith. And that if he did not desist, the evils would still be pardoned, but not to the same extent. 6061. The idea of God as a man. Zinzendorf. There was discussion amongst spirits as to whether it is implanted in man to view God as a man. Some said, that they who, in the world, viewed God, in their thought, as a little cloud, or as light, or as the inmost of nature, are not able to view God as a man. Wherefore, this was tested with some and also, once, with Zinzendorf, and with an elder of the Moravian communion, both of whom, in the world, viewed him, in the sight of the thought, as something cloudy. They were let into their spiritual state. And they then inquired where God the Father was, and then thought nothing else than of seeing him as a man. They inquired also where he was, and when they returned into their natural state with me, they regarded him as something cloudy. Hence they were convinced that it is rooted in man's spirit to look upon God as a man. There came to Zinzendorf some of the Gentiles in western India, with whom he there spoke. He talked to them concerning God, saying, at that time, that God sent his Son, who saved us from hell. They believed, because they held the idea of God as a man. But, when they now gathered together in the spiritual world, they discerned that he had an idea of God, as being, as it were, in a cloud. Being astonished at this, they said, What is this? You think of God as not a man. When yet they had believed that he thought of God as a man when he spoke to them about the Lord. 6062. Zinzendorf and Paul. He, viz. Zinzendorf, was in an abstract idea, not as though he were speaking to anyone, but as if he thought in himself, or spoke with a friend who divulges nothing. He said that he could not at all think otherwise respecting the Lord than as he thought about another man, and not that he was God. And yet he said the divine was in him, but he meant the divine as it is with another man. He said, also, that he spoke in a very simple manner, and not wisely, and that Paul spoke more wisely. But it was shown him that the Lord spoke from divine wisdom itself, by correspondences, exactly as he also spoke by the prophets, consequently from his own divine. And that Paul indeed spoke from inspiration, but not in the same way as the prophets, to whom every single word was dictated, but that his inspiration was that he received an influx, according to those things which were with him. Which is quite a different inspiration, and has no conjunction with heaven by correspondences. 6063. Writings and speech in the spiritual world. That speech and writing in the spiritual world differ entirely from the speech and languages in the world, so that there is no similarity, may be evident from these circumstances. 1. When writing is being done there. A single letter stands for an entire word, and that word a general term comprehending many things in itself. And these many things are gathered from what precedes and what follows, or from the matter itself which is being written about, say, for example, that it is bono, equals by good, the b, there, signifies glory in majesty. O, signifies along with, or among, n, signifies the evil, thus, among the evil, when it signifies among the good, there is a point above. 2. All the vowels signify something that conjoins, thus among, along with, in, or into, and so on, I, there, i.e. in a word, signifies that which is from the interior, etc. 3. They speak in this way, too, as, for example, vita, equals life, signifies valley, begone, depart, and so forth. This refers to instances in which they understood nothing of their writing in the natural state, but only in the spiritual. 6064. Newton. I spoke with him several times. He is a thoroughly sincere man, and is among his own, and is beloved. He told me that he now knows that the Lord is the Son of the angelic heaven, and that all light, which in its essence is divine intelligence, and which gives intelligence to angels and also to men, is from him. Although men are ignorant that light enlightens the understanding, and causes them to think intelligently. He also knew that there was one life which causes everyone to live, and that life appears amongst them as light, and that life is from it also, that it inflows into man's inmosts, and brings it about that it appears to man as if from himself. He also stated that, where he is, there appear colors much more brilliant than in the world, and of much greater variety. Also, that the colors there originate from the modification of the divine light into life-receiving form in angels and men, and that from it are the varieties of understanding. Respecting the planes of colors, he spoke in this fashion, that there were 3, white from light, red from fire, and black from shade, and that all the varieties of colors arise therefrom. 6065. Those who are in faith separate, also, what that faith is. Melanchthon, and the 10 Commandments. 355 Melanchthon was let out of his cell, and incited to assemble those spirits who, in the world, confessed faith alone, and with whom this was the chief thing of religion. They were assembled to the number of many thousands, and then were sent thence to a field where they might be separated, each according to his life. When they were assembled, a communication was made to them out of heaven, that faith saves no one, for the reason that there is neither life nor truth in it. Wherefore, they inquired what truth is, and what life is. 2. It was then replied, that truth and life are to live according to the commands of the Decalogue, for instance, not to steal, or act insincerely and unjustly, which is the 7th 356 commandment. The truth, in this case, is, that to act insincerely is a sin, that to live unjustly is a sin also, that living sincerely and acting justly is truth, thus, truth and life make one. Truth is to know evil and it is to know good. And truth is man's when he shuns evil and loves good. In like manner as regards the 6th commandment, to shun adulteries, to love the chastity of marriage, truth is, to know that adulteries are sins and it is truth that chastity is heavenly. Hence life causes truth to be, and truth is when there is also life. It is similar with not to kill, cherish hatred or take revenge. If this be shunned, a man comes to have charity. Similarly as regards the 8th, not to witness falsely, etc. 3. From these things it is manifest that life and truth are one, and so far as man does 357 falsities, which consist in believing and doing those evils, so far the truth is not in him. So far, also, as he lives according to those commandments, so far is he in truth, and so far he loves truth, and desires to know what sincerity, justice, chastity, charity and truth are. And, inasmuch as he is then led by the Lord, it is granted him to know what evil and good are, and what those specific evils and goods. For these things, therefore, are truth, which is faith. Faith, apart from these, is a sounding word, and has nothing of articulation, or voice, in the sound. It is sound inarticulate, consequently, not a word. 5. In this, and no other way, is he able to believe that God is, that the Lord is the Saviour of the world, why he came into the world, why he suffered the cross, what is meant by his having borne the sins of the world, and many other things. For, so far as a man practices those precepts which belong to the second table, which was the covenant on man's part, so far does the Lord grant him to believe that God is, which is the covenant of the first table, which is on the part of God. That the Decalogue is the complex of all things of truth and good, is hence plain, and also from the fact that it was promulgated with such a miracle and with such solemnity, that the 10 Commandments were written by the finger of God. That they are called 10 from the fact that they are all, and that they were placed in the ark, upon which was the mercy seat, and above that, the cherubim. The mercy seat is the Lord, and the cherubim were the word in the letter, also the veil placed in front, and it was called the Holy of Holies. Outside these, were all things of heaven and the church in a representative image. There was the table with the shewbread, there was the golden altar of incense, there was the candlestick with the lamps, by all which were represented all things belonging to heaven. That church, also, was a representative one, and, inasmuch as the divine law in its whole complex was in it, therefore there was a fire there by night and a cloud by day. The fire signified love, and the cloud truth. Hence it was, that all the Levites, together with Aaron, pitched their tents round the ark, and that Aaron ministered there, likewise, that the ark showed them the way when they went forward. For the very truth, which is of faith, when it is living, leads. Afterwards, that ark divided the Jordan, by which is meant, entrance into the church, the land of Canaan signifies the church. And afterwards, also, it wrought miracles, and was introduced into the city of David, by which is signified the church in which divine truth reigns. The pattern of it was seen and exhibited in heaven, and the Lord there spoke, between the cherubim, with Moses and Aaron. 6. When I know these things, then I know what faith is, what love, what religion, and what the church and heaven in man. Otherwise, not. 7. This, therefore, is to think about God in the life, since, no one is able, to think about God in the life in any other way, and this, also, is to love God. This, too, is to begin from life and to receive faith thus. And thus faith is from life and according to it. This, likewise, is love to God and love towards the neighbor. Hence is plain what the conjunction of love and faith is. 6066. The province of the neck. That they who are diligent constitute the province of the neck was manifested from D. Octor, Hagard, who was busy in transcribing various things. By diligence, moreover, communication of the head with the body takes place. 6067. The Indo-Chinese. I was in bed, and slept sweetly and most deliciously for 6 hours, or more, and, when I awoke, there were, above me, at a distance, Chinese, sitting there, as the Indians are wont to do with the feet crossed. And I was told that angels spoke wisely to them about God and about his marvelous attributes, and that they were so delighted at this, that they were in the tranquility of peace. Others were unable to approach, because it was a spiritual celestial sphere. When I had awaked, the company withdrew. 6068. Zinzendorf. I spoke with a certain one, and he said, that, they who practice charity, or the divine commands, on account of God, and at the same time with a view to heaven, are utterly damned, and that it is better for Sodom and Gomorrah than for them. He afterwards said, that it is no harm for a man to live in sins, even the graver ones, inasmuch as God has then an opportunity for mercy, and that all things are of mercy. He also said, that, if another had taken on himself the passion of the cross, he would have been accepted for the Son of God, if Jesus Christ had not been willing, and that he is the adoptive Son of God, born, in fact, in order to become so. But that he said that it was of his own will. 6069. What the spiritual is. The spiritual may think what is the nature and extent of the natural. Thus the spiritual is not finite and bounded, as the natural is. There are in the spiritual world, numbers, measures, spaces, times, and materials, and those there also see them, they see spaces and materials, and perceive times, they have names for numbers and measures. But they think of those things from quality, as, also, what they signify. It was perceived that the spiritual cannot, by any means, be thought of naturally, but yet that it inflows into the rational natural, as cause into effect. 6070. The Dragon. There was a preacher at The Hague. He was of the doctrine of faith alone. He appeared to others exactly like a dragon, and also seemed to stand in front of a woman who was, as it were, bringing forth, in the desire of devouring the offspring when it should come forth. The Lord's Church, which is the New Jerusalem, was representatively portrayed by the woman, and its doctrine by the offspring. 6071. Palm. He meditated much, just as in the world, but yet in a material manner, because his thought was engaged only in mechanics and physics, which he applied to mechanical appliances in certain things. He was also such after death. He there applied himself to the appearances and objects of sight which are there, and hence invented many magical things. In these he was a better workman than others. He made statues in various ways, and also tables, of such things as corresponded to the affections, and adapted them more diligently than others, by which things communication was given with certain societies of the lowest heaven. This was allowed him for the sake of the purgation of those societies, and he so constructed these things, that the evil in the societies sometimes communicated replies to them. Hence it happened, that he was cast into an exceedingly dark hell, where he was deprived of that inventiveness. 6072. Idleness, use, hen, Rick, Benzelstierna. 358. It was made known to me by experience, that idleness is the devil's pillow, because idleness is like a sponge which draws to itself dirty water of various sorts, inasmuch as he who is in idleness, speaks, and therefore thinks about all things in the world, pure and impure, and hence receives the devil of all impure things, since man inclines to these things and there is not anything to drive them away. Only the love of uses repels them, for this holds the mind in its delight, and thus regards all other things as outside itself. This was seen in the case of H. Enric B. Benzelstierna, who loved ease. Owing to his delight in it, he attracted to himself very many evils, and suffered himself to be led by the delights thereof, thus by the spirits who were in them. 6073. The neckband, necktie. 359. There was a certain one, who, in his youth, had read the word diligently, but afterwards, because he did not understand it, banished it from the mind, saying to himself that moral or natural theology is a better teacher. Wherefore, he fell into that opinion, and forsook the word. He came to angels, and the angels said, "What is the use of the word?" And that moral life apart from theological life, does not effect any use, does not purify from evils, and by itself does not conduce to life eternal. He, on hearing this, assented. Wherefore a neckband was given him by the angels, a white necktie, 360, delighted with which, he returned home. But that necktie made him almost unable to see. The cause was inquired into, and it was stated that it was because he had burst asunder the bond between heavenly and moral things, and that, consequently, with that band on, he was not able to see, but only without it. Because those things which are of heaven and the church constitute the head, and moral and natural things constitute the body, and the neck constitutes their conjunction. Hence was manifest what the neck signifies, and what that which clothes it. 6074. Zinzendorf. He was with me for several days, and heard and perceived what they who were with me from the Lord thought about charity and faith, and what befell those who, in doctrine and in life, are in faith alone, namely, that they are in a wretched condition, and, further, that there is not any faith where there is not charity. It was also told him what charity is. On being told, he was amazed as, also, at the fact that the whole word is the Lord. He saw this, also, that he had been in error in believing, that the propheticals were nothing, 361, and many other things. He was also grieved that he did not know this in the world, and being sent to one of the same communion, he told him that he may now do as he will, that it is not as they believe in the world, and withdrew. I conversed with him about the three great errors, 1. That the Lord is the adoptive Son of God, by which he denied that his divine is from himself. 2. That they discarded the word of the Old Testament, and read the evangelists with a certain contempt, esteeming only the epistles of Paul. 3. That they have quite excluded from religion, and almost condemned, the works of charity. It was also shown that all who so do, close heaven against themselves. He believed that he was enlightened, but it was shown him that enlightenment is not conferred, while those three errors are entertained. 6075. Merit in good works. Good works take place with merit, and they take place without merit, as may be illustrated by the person who holds an office, and who performs his duty for the sake of merit. It is in order to obtain applause, thus for the sake of reputation, and honor and future promotion, or for the sake of gain. But, if he can have these things without the performance of his duty, he does so. But he who does not place merit in it, does it on account his obligation, because it belongs to his office. In this lies concealed the fear of God, and also love of the community, but in the former is the love of self and the world. Also take as an example, a workman. One does his work because it is of his religion, and hence because he is under obligation, to do it, this is his end, but another does it merely to obtain applause and to be better thought of, solely that he may profit thereby. The latter places merit therein, the former not. The former, like the other, accepts any fame, honor and profit, but to such ones these things are additions from the Lord. 6076. The Quakers. In addition to what has been previously disclosed, which are their abominations regarding their wives and sexual intercourse, it is also added that they preach the New Testament, because he, i.e., the Lord, was born of the Holy Spirit, and, say, that they are, likewise, and hence that they speak from the Holy Spirit as much as he, and that they are in the Holy Spirit when they eat. And that, when others are eating, they infuse the Holy Spirit into their feasts, and also that, in this way, there is the sanctification and proving of others, whether they are of them, and are able to enter among them. 6077. The inhabitants of Tartary close to China, Lesser Tartary. There were some from that country with me. They came while I was asleep and I slept tranquilly. On my awakening, they noticed that they were not at home, but somewhere else. They wondered where they were, because they did not recognize such things as were in the world of spiritual things, as at all like those they were accustomed to seeing. They spoke of the country where they lived, that it was populous, and that they knew nothing about war. They knew of China and of Siberia. They said that, with them, he governs who is able to govern, and if he is not able, he is dismissed with a fine. They accord him no other honor than as a wise man who can tell them whether this or that is just. They stated that they are all engaged in their labors at home, in making clothes, in cultivating the land, and the like. When they came, they marveled that they should be questioned by Christians as to God being a man. Inasmuch as they believed that all knew this, without any question whether it be so. In like manner respecting the precepts of the Decalogue, for example, regarding only one wife, whether they live so, as if they did not know that everyone so lived, since the Lord wills it, etc. They stated that they have houses, where they are taught about life, and about the commandments of God. They said that they had a book, respecting which people elsewhere do not know that they have it. They called it the Divine Book. They read this, and are instructed by it and understand it. Inquiry was made, and it was the Psalms of David. They said that strangers are indeed admitted among them, but they do not give them the means of going away. They give them necessary food, and if one wishes to work, he is accepted. They also possess the Decalogue. They call the Chinese their friends, because they are of their race. They do not think of wars, in their country. They have some fear of Siberia, but say that they have nothing, and that, if they came, they would at once surrender to them, but still they would all go away with their belongings, unawares to them. 6078. Zinzendorf. I asked him what he thinks about those who are justified by their faith. He said that they are no longer able to do any evil, because it is not looked upon as evil by God, and that, even though they commit an enormous evil, it is not imputed to them if they return to faith. I heard him saying why they are so furious against those who are in charity. He said, that this is abominable, because they steal from God the things which are God's, claiming to themselves merit, which is God's alone, and that this is the sin of sins. 6079. The pathway of faith, or from it, into the will. I conversed with spirits about the pathway of faith. That it proceeds from the affection of truth to the perception of truth, consequently from the understanding to the thought, and afterwards either remains in the memory, or proceeds from the memory, thus. From the understanding immediately into the speech, but is not appropriated to man unless he advances from understanding to agent, thus it comes into the will. If it is something to be done, it comes into the intention, thus into the will, and into act, so that, the sequence, is, love, affection of truth, perception of the understanding, assent or intention, will, and action or speech. I said to spirits that to go from faith to good works is to go in inverted order, as, for example, when one provides himself with decorations and utensils of various kinds, and places them in a room the windows of which are blocked up. They do not appear, unless a flame be brought in. A flame gives light, so that all those things appear, otherwise, they are indeed there, but in darkness. Love, or affection, is the flame, faith is the light from it. And without spiritual faith, which is the light of life, nothing lives, or is in a light which endures. 6080. The Lord's influx into man's honors and gains, shunning evils. The Lord is always present with man, and urges that good and truth may be received. But, with those who had not shunned evils, that influx is turned into their proprial loves, which are of the love of self and the world, which are called forth. And thus the Lord leads men of the world by their proprial affections, so that man turns the influx of good, or love, in himself, into such things. He who does not shun evils, is inwardly in himself bowed down with evils, and outside himself is obsessed by such spirits as relate to his love, consequently, the Lord is unable to reach the man, because goods are turned into such things. 6081. The Moravians and Zinzendorf. The Moravians, who believed that they, more than all communication in the world, were the living and the saved, on that account mounted on high, as usually happens, and were there divided into several societies. But, inasmuch as they desired to have dominion over the rest, they looked down and attached themselves to a certain devil, through whom they forced others, who did not acknowledge their religiosity, to obedience. Even wishing to torture those who did not receive it. But, when their time came, they were cast down, successively, to lower places, and were compelled to enter a cavern which they entered, complaining that they were surprised that they have not food as the rest have, nor adornments for the house. But as, on account of deprivation of food, and other adversities, they were unable to stay there, they were let out, and the greatest part of them driven forth into desert places, where they live wretchedly. On their expressing astonishment at this, they were told that the reason was that they had rejected the three various essentials of the church and of heaven: 1. The divine of the Lord. 2. The word of the prophets. They had, also, despised the evangelists, and, 3. The works of charity, which they had utterly rejected from themselves, and blasphemed. And, since theme 3 have been rejected, they have their portion, not with the blessed but with the miserable. Zinzendorf saw this, and he desires to recede, laboring earnestly, as he sees their calamity, to be able to do so. 6082. Jerusalem and the Temple after the captivity. The building of the Temple commenced in the year 72 after the captivity. Completed as to the interior portions in 91-94. Jerusalem built, 163. Haman wishes to massacre the Jews, 215. The temple is pillaged, 439. The Jews are driven to idols by Antiochus, 441. The temple cleansed, 444. Alcimus begins to destroy the temple wall, 449. Hyrcanus, and Stabulus, Alexander Janneus reign in Judea, 504, 505, 506. Aristobulus, 2. till 542. Pompey takes Jerusalem, 545. Antigonus takes possession of Judea, 568. Herod is then declared king of Judea, 568. Herod besieges and reduces Jerusalem, 571, 572. Augustus sets about building the temple, 586. The building of the temple finished, Herod celebrates the dedication, 595. The temple polluted by the Samaritans, 615. The building of the temple discontinued, 631. The Lord is born, 605. 6083. Hieroglyphics. Trismegistus, living in Egypt in the time of Moses as is supposed, is believed to have invented the mode of expressing ideas of the mind by images of beasts, which are called hieroglyphics. 6084. The speech of the third heaven. I conversed with spirits about angelic speech, and said that spiritual speech cannot be at all understood by anyone who is in a natural state. But that natural speech can be understood by spirits who are in a spiritual state, though only according to correspondences, and likewise the reverse, but, in that case, spiritual speech falls into natural. Hence it is, that man does not know anything about the spirits amongst whom he is, nor a spirit know anything about the man with whom he is. They were told that the spiritual angels are not able to understand celestial speech, or that of the angels of the third heaven, because their speech is the speech of affections. As this occasioned surprise, an angel from that heaven spoke with them, and they did not understand anything at all, by which was established that the angels of the third heaven have a higher speech. 6085. The operation of the understanding and of the will, thus of faith and of love. The appearance, which is a fallacy, is, that the understanding acts upon the will, or faith upon love, and produces it. But it was shown to many that this is not so. Spirits not good fully understood their own evils, reasoned against them, and called themselves fools, but they were then in understanding, resulting from the affection of being distinguished for intelligence. As soon, however, as they were led into the evils of their will, their understanding was insane. This was repeated several times and it always so fell out. So that they confessed that the understanding merely teaches, and does not produce the will, but the will the understanding. That such is the appearance is clear. It appears as though the sight of the eye leads the feet in walking so as not to stumble, and the hands to act and work, when, yet, the eye only teaches and does not produce. The action of the feet and hands are the wills. And the sight of the eye is the understandings, and there is a full correspondence. But he who believes that fallacy, and yet lives aright, suffers no harm for, in the spiritual world, there are many such who are blessed. When they, however, come to the second or third heaven, they are instructed and see how the case is. Nor can the matter be believed differently, not only on account of the appearance, but also on account of the received faith, that it, viz. Faith, produces works. They liken faith to a tree, and fruit to works. But this is fallacious. By a tree is meant man, and by branches, boughs and leaves, faith, and by fruits, good works. Man is what produces. 6086. Spiritual light is divine wisdom. Worldly spirits do not perceive this, because they have their idea from the light of the world, but it was shown them that it is so. A certain one who was in doubt about that matter, inasmuch as he was as much in light as the others, who were not worldly, was told, that he does not see there from his own light, but from theirs. Wherefore, when their light was removed, he was left to his own light and was in darkness. He was afterwards led into a place where there were worldly spirits, who, although not in the light of heaven, still saw. When he came thither, he at first saw nothing, he afterwards saw as they did, for his eyes were adapted to darkness, as is the case with certain birds which see at night, and, then, he saw as if in the light. Nevertheless, he was shown that it has not spiritual light. He was brought back to the former place, where there was spiritual light, and then he did not see until the former sight was removed. 6087. Queen Christina. She dwelt in a house, which was quite elegant and splendid from such things as were within. Mubler 362. There were servants there to attend upon her, but not altogether her own, still, sufficient for politeness. She is in a certain spiritual world which corresponds to spinning. Thither went C. Harles, 12, in order to talk, and at length they went out. It was through a spacious, panelled gallery. Immediately afterwards, she told how she conversed with the cardinals in Rome. Which was in a familiar way with all kinds of pleasantries, always bantering them, as it were, yet understandingly, by various devices, whereby she represented many things which charmed their minds. She wished, for example, persons, to appear naked before them. To which they replied, saying, that this could not be, and would be unbecoming. She said, that it was becoming, because to go naked is always to appear in pure truths, to which they assented. She showed in various ways what sort she was. She next related various things, how she conversed with the Pope, whom, also, she sometimes pleased by her ways, and, being asked what she thought of Christ, she replied that he was the High Pope. To which he replied that he was not, because he gave the power to Peter, and thus to him. He said that, she, affirmed this of the Son of God, by whom he meant the human from the mother. But she replied that, he is, the Son of God from eternity, who is equal to the Father, and, since the Father was above the Pope, he was also. To this, the Pope, on reflection, could make no reply. Nevertheless, he wished her not to tell others. But, still, she insisted that it could not be otherwise. After this, she spoke with the cardinals, and told them to swear themselves upon the creed of Athanasius. They said they had sworn it before. But she compelled them, by her pleasant ways, to affirm it yet again with a certain oath, which was done. She then said, that it is there laid down that his divine was in his human, like the soul and the body, and that thus it is one person. And then she strenuously insisted that they must not separate them, that, since the body apart from its soul is not a man, there is not anything that could give anything. Consequently, that his soul had given what was its own, to his body, inasmuch as they are one, and that thus the Son of God, as respects both, soul and body, is not able to give away what he still possesses. Today, also, she bantered the cardinals, nor were they able to reply. They confessed that the Lord, since the divine and human constitute one person, was above the Pope, and ought to be so acknowledged. They gave way to her, and assented. For she fascinated them by those pleasantries in her familiar talk, because she was a queen. She also told the cardinals that the papal power is divine, since, according to their doctrine, it was given to the Son, who also was God, and who was able to receive it because he was God and the only begotten Son. But to bestow divine power on a man who is not God, this the understanding does not accept. She also asked what is meant by the rock, Petram. The Pope replied that it was the Lord and so forth. 6088. Food in the spiritual world. They eat and drink there, just as in the natural world, but all food there is from a spiritual origin, wherefore, it is not obtained beforehand, but is given daily. When it is dinner time, and also when it is supper time, a table furnished with viands appears while the meal time lasts, and disappears when they have dined, or supped. All spirits whatsoever, are supplied with food according to their employments, rulers sumptuously, with much pomp, the magnificence of which cannot be described, the rest less sumptuously according to their condition. Be it observed that everyone is provided with food according to the labors which he performs. He who has no employment, business and work, does not receive food, but begs. I have seen grandees thus begging, because they were unwilling to do any work, also, women of rank. I have seen grandees who lived magnificently in the world, provided only with bread and milk. And, when they complained that there was nothing more, they were told that they do no work, and food is not given to the slothful and those who pass the time in idleness. By this means, they are reduced to the performance of some mean employment, in order to receive sustenance. Moreover, they go to such as work, and by begging eat with them, but this does not last long. Bread can be bought in the places where such ones are, but not every kind of food. The reason is, because certain ones wish to be paid for the labors which they do, and because, if they thus work, the wages can be spent in buying bread. But there is no buying except with such as are good. To those in such duties, bread comes gratuitously. Besides other like things. All in the hells are forced to work, and those who do not work receive neither food, nor garments, nor bed. Thus are they driven into labors. The reason is, because idleness is the root of all wickedness, for, in idleness, the mind is spread out to various evils and falsities, but, in work, it is held to one thing. Food cannot be kept till the morrow, worms breed in it, as in the manna. This is signified in the Lord's Prayer, "Give us daily bread," and also by the circumstance that nothing of the paschal lamb, nor of the sacrifices, was to be laid by till the morrow. Inasmuch as the food is from a spiritual origin, and so is in itself spiritual, and since spirits and angels are men, and are furnished with a spiritual body, therefore such spiritual nourishment is adequate for them. A spiritual being is, therefore, nourished in this spiritual manner, and a material man materially. As all things that appear in the spiritual world correspond to the affections, and to the thoughts of the understanding, thence, their houses, garments, fields, gardens, paradises do so, all of which, likewise, are from a spiritual origin. And good affection, together with the thought of the understanding of truth, cannot exist in idleness, but is dispersed. Therefore, food does not exist otherwise than according to correspondences. And, moreover, the works of those who are in hell have correspondences with the heavens, but not the infernal spirits themselves. As was the case with the Israelitish and Jewish nation, who, although they were evil, yet their representative worship nevertheless corresponded, respecting which correspondence of those things, see in the Doctrine of the New Jerusalem 363 no. 248, their food was seen as manifestly as the like food in our world. The food is of every kind, and also of every variety of luxuriousness. There are also table decorations which cannot be described in natural language. 6089. The Council of Trent. The decrees of that council were confirmed by bull, in 1564, in November of that year. 1. That Holy Scripture is not to be explained and interpreted by any, save by the Church. 2. That the 7 sacraments are, baptism, confirmation, the Eucharist, repentance, extreme unction, order, and matrimony. 3. That the body and blood are truly, really, and substantially in the Eucharist, together with the soul and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ, and that there takes place a turning of the whole substance of the bread into the body, and of the whole substance of the wine into the blood, which they call conversion and transubstantiation. 4. That souls detained in purgatory are benefited by the suffrages of friends. 5. That the saints reigning with Christ should be venerated and invoked. 6. That honors and veneration are to be paid to images. 7. That the Pope is the successor of Peter, the chief of the apostles, and the vicar of Jesus Christ. The following are from the bull, that the saints reigning with Christ, offer their prayers for men to God, and that it is for this reason good and profitable to invoke them in prayer, and on account of the benefits obtained from God by His Son Jesus Christ, who is our only Redeemer and Savior, to have recourse to their prayers, assistance and help. But that those think wickedly who deny that the saints enjoying eternal happiness in heaven are to be invoked, or who assert, either that they do not pray for men, or that the invoking of them to pray also for each one of us is idolatrous, or that it is repugnant to the word of God and opposed to the honor of the one mediator of God and men, Jesus Christ, or that it is folly to supplicate, orally or mentally, those who are reigning in heaven. Concerning justification by faith, and sanctification by it, the Catholics entertain almost similar opinions with the Reformed. There is not much difference. 6090. Spiritual language or speech. That spiritual language, or speech, has nothing at all in common with human languages, was manifest to me from the words of that language, which cannot be in the least understood by any man. And yet, nevertheless, every man comes into that language, after death, of his own accord, so that it is implanted in his spiritual man, but not in the natural. This may be evident from these two words, they say, vita vella, which signifies, let him be afar off and depart quickly, and from the word, scapulagia, which signifies, to cast out of doors. I have not yet been taught whence the words of that language originate. They take up the words, not from the sound of affection, but from the significations of the vowels and consonants. The ideas of thought fall into such unfoldings of the lips. Their writing differs from the speech. 6091. Genevieve, Genevieva. She sometimes appears to the Parisians, at a middle elevation above, and in splendid clothing, and with a face of as it were divine holiness, and beautiful. She is beheld by many, and there are some who wish to invoke her. Then her face is changed, and she becomes like another woman, and chides them, saying that they are forbidden to be worshippers of men and women, and this till they are ashamed. She says, also, that she ranks with ordinary women, and is held in no more estimation than any other woman, that she is in a certain society where she is not known, being held in small esteem there. And that she knows nothing at all about those who are in the world, still less hears or perceives anything, marveling that men of the world are taken in by such nonsense. She says, also, that she is not among the better ones. And that whoever wishes to be greater than others becomes meaner than others. And that it does harm to many to be canonized, because, when they hear of it, they are puffed up owing to hereditary evil, and begin to be proud, and are removed from where they are to some place where they do not know themselves. As to who they were in the world. 6092. I heard from a certain pope, that he has spoken with all who have been made saints, of both sexes, and that, with the exception of 2, he had not seen one of them in heaven, and these 2 abhor invocation. The greatest part do not know who they are, some are as it were silly. 6093. 3 persons of the divinity. I compelled certain spirits to speak out, or express themselves, concerning the one God, just as they think. Those who are spiritual, and whose thoughts fall into their speech and produce it, could not, at that time, when they would say one God, pronounce one God with the lips. They folded the lips into various shapes, and wanted to force it out. But in vain. 6094. In the touch of the hand there is affection from thought. It has been made known to me, by living experience, that, in the touch of the hand there is affection together with thought. I touched an angel with my hand, and the angel stated, that, from the touch alone, he perceived, my affection and the associated thought. Hence is manifest, whence it comes that those in the spiritual world are engaged in labors, it is because, by means of the hand, in work, thought is determined to something living. This, also, is why the Lord touched many people, and why inauguration into the priesthood takes place by the touch of the hand upon the head, and many things besides. 6095. The Africans. They appear in striped linen garments. Their women likewise, in striped garments, but silken. They, more than others, imbibe truths from ardent desire. They call this being fed, for, when they are in the desire of those truths, they go forth and search for food. This is innate in them, as is manifest from their infants, in that they frequently tell their nurses that they want to eat, and, when food is given, they examine whether it agrees, and this from correspondence. And, after they have eaten, they again ask to eat, from which is manifest that it is spiritual hunger which affects it. They, i.e. the Africans, say that they are indeed permitted by the civil law to take 2 or 3 wives. But they say that yet they take but one, for the reason that love which is distributed among many is external, and hence lascivious, but with one wife, is internal, and truly conjugal. They know in what state of spiritual intelligence they are, by looking at a sword. If it glitters, it is a sign of the reception of truth in abundance, with a difference according to the brightness. They said that monks sometimes penetrate to them, but they then hear what they know, and when they find that it is nothing but rubbish, they inquire what the monks are useful for. And, when they are not serviceable in labors, or in managing anything, they are sold for slaves, and they are then allowed by their law to chastise them and, if they cannot then be compelled to perform anything useful, they sell them for a small price to the lower classes. 6096. Conjugal love, a synopsis. I.N.B. In the divine sense, it is the marriage of love and wisdom in the Lord, hence the two partners are an image of the Lord. 2:1. The marriage of the Lord with heaven and the church. 3:2. The marriage of love and wisdom, or of good and truth. 4:3. Heaven is called a marriage, and the church, also. V4. The word is a marriage, because it is divine good united with divine truth proceeding from the Lord. 6:5. Man, male and female, or husband and wife, are especially that marriage. That marriage is in every single thing in nature. 7:6. Conjugal love is the fundamental of all loves. 8:7. Conjugal love is a heavenly love. 9:8. Conjugal love is not possible, save between two. 9. Two married partners are continually being united, and according to the unit ion, potency and delight increase. 11:10. Adultery is the union of the devil and those who are adulterers. It is the union of evil and falsity. 12. Hell is adultery, and evil, also. There cannot be found any who say it is in themselves. 13. The adulteration of the good of the word, and the falsification of its truth, is adultery, many things about this. 14. Adultery is opposed to creation. 15. Adultery is the fundamental love of all evils. 16. Adultery is the commingling of many lives in one. 17. Potency diminishes, and aversion takes place. It also becomes common, unaccompanied by any sensation, and, at last, there is aversion. 18. What sort of whoredoms the adulteries which destroy conjugal love are? 19. The various kinds of adulteries, see immediately above. Marriage and adultery. XX. To acknowledge charity in not faith, is adultery of a brother and a sister. 21. Man is formed by conjugal love, to be a form of love, whence come all the remaining heavenly loves. XXII. The destruction of that form is from adulteries. XEI. Hell is adultery. 24. The following things correspond to the acts of adulteries there, XXV. Those who worship only the Father, and think nothing of the Lord's divine, are in the adultery as of a brother with a sister. 26. Those who are in faith alone, are in the adultery as of a mother with a son. 18. 364. Those who are in the mere sense of the letter, and study that for the sake of honor only, are in the adultery of a father with a daughter-in-law. 29. Those who are in the highest degree of the love of ruling from the love of self, and not for the sake of use, are in Sodom. XXX. Those who are in the delight of variety of adultery, are such as love commerce with beasts and they become like the mucus of the nostrils. 31. I learned, by experience, in the night time, from those in faith alone who were in an expanse above, that those same things which are in the creed of faith separated, are turned into various foul whoredoms. 6097. Luther and Melanchthon. Since Luther, and afterwards Melanchthon, began to make disturbances roundabout in defending faith separated, they were therefore borne down from the spiritual world to their own places, according to life, where they do not know who they are. This occurred on the 30th day of December, 1763. 6098. An English bishop. A bishop wished to see me for the purpose of refuting those things which have been written concerning faith separated, and he saw me. He said, that, in England, they would, indeed, receive the first work, 365 concerning the Lord, and also the position that a new church is meant by the New Jerusalem. The second work, 2, concerning the sanctity of the word, and likewise the third, concerning the doctrine of life, but that they would utterly reject the fourth, concerning faith. And then I began to reason with him about justification by that faith, and at length, being convinced, he acknowledged that unless the fourth work, concerning faith, were received, the three former would come to naught, besides many other things. But that bishop, who died 3 years before, disclosed what art he employed to nullify those things which were written previously concerning heaven and hell, 366 and the rest, both in the House of Lords, apud my lords, and by the priests at Oxford. Also, that he accomplished this, so that nothing is now heard of them. Moreover, that bishop, inasmuch as he had confirmed himself in faith alone, and, consequently, possessed nothing of spiritual faith, because nothing of charity, was conjoined with societies of hell. Wherefore, also, he became a magician, and abused correspondences there, by which means, such ones are able to appear as if spiritual. I saw him ascending towards heaven with a bundle of wood on his back, and, afterwards, with an infant in his arms which he adorned with many beautiful representatives of good and truth. He changed the bundle of wood into the infant, and, by means of fantasies, caused it to shine, and thus it seemed no otherwise than that it was that. But at the entrance to heaven he was recognized, and sent back to his own, who were all priests, and had confirmed themselves in the same thing. Wood corresponds to good. But they were all immediately separated, according to life, and according to confirmation of faith separate. I asked them whether they would permit me to recite to them the words which are read in the exhortation before the communion, that if they do not abstain from sin and repent of the sins there mentioned, the devil would enter into them as into Judas. But they besought me not to recite those words to them, it is enough that they repeat them in church, and believe them at the time. That bishop said that there is no sin. He said that not even adultery was sin, which, also, he persuaded a wife. Many others said the like, namely, that sins did not exist, because the Lord had taken them away, and because there is not any condemnation to those who are justified by that faith. He afterwards appeared like a viper, and was cast into hell. They were in the west quarter of London, and many were sent forth. 6099. Coxius and Voetius. I spoke with Coxius, who was with me for several days. And I said many things to him about repentance, both from the exhortation before the Holy Supper, and also from the Decalogue and from the Creed of Athanasius, to the effect that man ought to shun evils as sins. And he was convinced, for he could not deny it. But, still, he insisted that this is not a matter of doctrine, and that his doctrine was the very doctrine of the Church. I spoke to him out of the Word. But he said that he saw those things in the Word, but that they relate to faith. On being examined as to doctrine, it was stated by him and by his followers, that he preached the mysteries of faith more constantly and more deeply than others. That, he went, beyond justification to interior effort, saying, that the operation of the Holy Spirit works through faith received as far as the will, but that, on arriving at the will, it elevated itself so as not to touch any part of the will of man, and took its exit on the left, above the will, and thus purified man of his evils. Besides other mysteries which he fashioned, he made out the human will, in his idea, to be as it were a plane of filth, above which the divine influx operated, and from which it elevated itself so as not to touch any part of it. For thus man would mix himself up with the divine operation. In this way, he excluded all man's externals, saying, that these were then pure, from the internal influx, and that their evil was dispersed, and they were consequently, nothing else than good. And things similar to the internals appeared in the sight of God. To the question whether or not man should perform repentance, he said that this is the reply, it is no harm if it be done for the sake of the public good, but if for the sake of salvation it is damnable. I spoke to him about that faith. But he said it is the true faith, but, yet, in his idea, he was unwilling to think of the Lord, but about the Father only, believing, that the whole of salvation depends on him, and nothing of it on the Lord. When I said that he had taught that he has all power in heaven and on earth, and that he is one with the Father, he was silent, being unwilling to say anything. In like manner, when I said that God and man, in the Lord, according to the faith of Athanasius, is one person, he said he had not heard this before, therefore that he had not read that creed. He says that he has an idea solely of the Father, and none respecting the Lord's divine. Thus he, himself, had denied, but, still, he had not disclosed the fact to others. He was an out-and-out Socinian at heart. It was proved to him, by many statements from the Word respecting the Lord, that the Father and he are one, and that he is the Jehovah of the prophets. But he replied, that he abides in his own theology, and does not wish to see those declarations there. He was transferred to a certain society in heaven and, when he opened his mysteries, it was shown him that the thing he set forth was absurd, yea ridiculous, and was mere fantasy. It seems as though he is becoming profane. He has also conjoined himself with a woman who is profane. His followers, most of whom were priests, who not only imbibed his principles, but also taught them, were collected together and were scattered abroad. Those more learned than the rest, are prelates, and the most learned, therefore, and most renowned in his country, is Cocceius. But, on investigation being made whether any of the laity and of the councillors knew anything about his theology, they said that they knew nothing at all, save that he and his followers were more learned and scholarly than others. The priests and professors are divided into Cocceians and Voetians. Voetius lived 100 years before, and Cocceius 110. I spoke with Cocceius himself. He said, that, at first, he was among his priests from Holland, and, as is customary, lived quite well, but that he was afterwards taken away to a little stone chamber. It was a house, or hut, of one apartment, with windows in it. He sits alone, having no servant, or wife, and prepares papers, which are taken by others. He said that, round about, there is nothing but gravel, and pebbles, and stones heaped up, with scanty grass interspersed. And that he has some communication with certain ones of a like character in the world of spirits, and also some with the Moravians. He said that he acknowledged the divine Trinity, but that, when he thought upon the Father, the rest, to him, were not anything. He also still writes something in his solitude, but frequently exclaims, I will demonstrate this, I know this, I will demonstrate this. I asked whether he was able to demonstrate it. He said that he knows, or from his idea perceives, that the thing is so. I inquired whether there were not many in his desert. He said there was an immense number, and that their huts were scattered and very little frequented. This desert is towards the front, at the right-hand side, or in front of the desert of those who are in faith alone. Sometimes he goes away further and to a greater distance, somewhat into another desert, where dwell such of the Christians as had indeed read the word, but did not know its doctrine. And, inasmuch as they rejected the goods of charity, or good works, like those who have not any religion, very many of them are in that desert of the Cocceius. None of them have any religion. For religion is of life and thence of faith, and not of faith separate, which is no religion. I asked them again about their religiosity. They stated that the divine operation is towards the plane of the will, but that it raises itself therefrom, and hence those things which are of man's will do not appear in the sight of God. Also, that they are dissipated when man dies, and that their faith affects this. They said that man has evils, but they are not sins in the sight of God, but evils against their fellows and the commonwealth. I told them that they were well aware, from their exhortation before the Holy Supper, that a man ought to examine himself, to see and confess his sins, and refrain from them, and that he who does not do so, profanes the Holy Supper. Also, that they have no remission of sins in any other way, and they knew that, without remission of sins, there is no salvation. To this they answered nothing, save that they did not think about this when they read out that exhortation. I said, also, that the Old Testament, and the New also, teach nothing else than love, goodwill, works, deeds, doing, thus life. And I asked whether it is possible for men to be Christians, when they do away with the whole word by the doctrine of their faith. They said that they saw such things in the word, but said to themselves that they are embraced in their faith. I spoke with some of the Voetians who said that their belief is that the divine operation goes as far as the will, and touches it. That still, however, it does not so excite man's will that it does anything of itself, but that, nevertheless, a secret inclination to do good is experienced, and everything that proceeds from that, unawares to the man, is of God. But what is from man's will, he knowing of it, is not of God, thus not good. That influx, and inclination therefrom, they call an impulse of good. They also say that everything that is done in secret is from man, and does not appear to God, and hence they do not think of evil regarded as sin, but only of evil against their fellows and the commonwealth. I asked the Boeotians why they wished the Sabbath to be kept holy. They said that they desire external observances, which are liked by the multitude, in order to catch the favor, or confidence, of the people. From this there is the appearance that they are zealous for doing good, the simpler one said, because the doing of good is commanded in the word. Most of the laity said that they know nothing at all about this theology of theirs. When any ask whether good is to be done, they say it is to be done, and they then understand that it is not for the sake of salvation. Some, when they inquire into their mysteries, and hear them, say these things are mystical, nothing else. Some of the Coxian priests who had confirmed themselves in that doctrine, were examined as to whether they had any religion. And it was found that they had nothing whatever of religion, and that they were entirely destitute of every truth. There was a Dutch town, situated below, at the right-hand side, respecting which I knew but little as to the character of the inhabitants, since there was not any communication opened. But I afterwards heard, that they have indeed lived together as good citizens, but have thought little about God in their life. They merely attended church, supposing that all divine worship consists in that. But, as in the world, they liked priests who had a reputation for scholarship, these were the Coxians. And the former ones, by means of insinuations into their rulers, brought it about that priests who were not scholars, should be appointed, these were the ones who preached that evils were to be shunned as sins against God. Thus there remained Coxian priests, who said, indeed, that good ought to be done, but not for the sake of salvation. They carefully guarded against thinking that, and said that there was not any sin, provided they held the received faith. When priests were appointed who were not scholarly, as they were called, then, from the sphere of the Coxians and of those who favored them, and from others there who were led astray by them, a change of their state was produced. And then the former ruler, who was good, resigned his office, and another, a slothful and simple man, succeeded, who was such that he did nothing, but merely presided. And then the gates were opened, and it was allowed to anyone to enter the town who wished. Hence, their state became such that they no longer thought upon anything relating to the church, but lived licentiously. Wherefore, that whole town sank down to a very great depth, together with the inhabitants and houses, and reached a situation deeper down. Of these, also, those of that nation who were above, complained that their minds became disquieted, because such lower ones were in that place, and formed their foundation. I spoke a little with the Coxians, to the effect that it was their belief that it was allowed to man to do whatever he pleases, and that their evils are not seen by God, provided they hold the received faith. Also, in their houses, and to certain ones around, they said that there is not any sin, and that they can do whatever they please if only they hold their faith. They preached, in like manner as in England, in a mystical style, fearing lest the multitude should penetrate into their mysteries. They said it was because the multitude understands only external things, but not internals. And declared that, if they were to preach their mysteries openly, they would be deprived of the priestly office by the people, and a riot might ensue. The divine operation by faith, as far as to the will, of which man knows nothing, the Coxians call charity, and what proceeds from the will, a destroyer of charity. I spoke with some of the laity regarding the Coxian religiosity. I said, what is the need of those mysteries? They are empty and likewise false, since they flow from an impure and evil fount. Is it not the same thing as though a workman, or a speaker, should want to have knowledge of all the mysteries in the body, of the muscles, the operation of the trachea, larynx, glottis, tongue, lips, in order to be able to speak well? Or to be able to work well? And thus, to work and speak from anatomical science? Is it not enough that he learn to speak well and elegantly, and to work well? This is what he should study. In like manner with knowledge of the divine operation and influx, is it not sufficient that a man know evils, shun them, and live as a Christian? Does not the Lord effect these things by most secret methods, just as the soul by secret methods operates, that the hands perform their work aright, and that a speaker speak aright? Can an anatomist work better, or can the dancer dance better, from anatomy? I also said, that the Coxians are Machiavellists. 6100. The Dutch who live in a vomit stench. The rule of wife over husband there. Visitation was made upon certain societies of the Dutch, where are those of whom the wives ruled over their husbands. They were in the boundaries at that part, and there was a vile stench of vomit there. Yea, they collected vessels full of vomit, and held the nostrils over them, and revelled in the stench. All those who were in the boundaries were cast down into hell. And some who were nearly like them, were gathered out of societies, and also cast down. 6101 to 6150. 6101. Certain English bishops. There was a certain one who was considered more scholarly and learned than the rest when he lived in the world, who, in the presence of his fellows, said various things to the king about his religion. For the king said that he thought of the Lord as his God, and that the life of charity could not be separated from faith. The bishop, however, contradicted this, and then said diverse things among his fellows respecting the king as regards religion, as though he wanted to stir them up to something. This he confessed in the spiritual world. He confessed that he had not thought of the Lord, save as a man. He was half a Socinian. He was examined as to what theological knowledge he possessed, and he knew nothing else than confirmations of the received faith, and in favor of the divine operation through faith, as far as the will, from which it raises itself. He was told that thus man was able to do whatsoever he will. He said, yes, whatever he will, provided it be not contrary to the civil laws. I asked whether, if he evade the punishments of the civil law, the thing is sin. He said that it is sin against the neighbor, but not against God, and that he ought to conciliate the neighbor, for the sake of utility, not for the sake of salvation. I said that in this way they were Machiavellists. This he denied, inasmuch as he acknowledges God and the Word. I asked whether, then, if they engage in robberies but evade the punishments, that evil will cleave to them after death. He said it would not, provided the man had faith. A certain other English bishop, who in himself cherished the belief that charity and faith cannot be separated, not internal, but external, or actual, charity, then examined the religiosity of faith alone. And found that there was not a single truth in all their theology, not even one. This he announced, and next proved it before the former bishop, and before other priests belonging to England, who, since it was said from heaven, were not able to answer anything. Afterwards, that former bishop described in what manner he especially scoffed at the 5 works, on heaven and hell, and the rest, 367 which I made a present to all, the bishops, and to all the reformed lords in Parliament. By abuse and misrepresentation, and at last put a stop to the reading of it, together with the rest, until they utterly rejected them. He also related what he had said to them, and something that others had said, and various discussions respecting them. When he was told that it is not my work, but the Lord's, who wish to reveal the nature of heaven and hell, and of man's life after death, and about the last judgment, and, the truth, that theological matters do not transcend reason. He was not ashamed, but some others were that they had done so. I then mentioned that this is the male whom the woman brought forth, and whom the dragon wished to devour, and on account of whom he persecuted the woman, Rev. 12. He could only reply, that it does indeed seem to be so, but that he does not wish to know it. Afterwards, that former bishop betook himself to a certain devil, with whom he stayed for 2 days, and consulted how he might slay me, as they slew the more stubborn deceitful ones. They tried, but in vain. He has communication with the Moravians in the desert. 368. Thus he became a devil, together with many others who have confirmed themselves in that detestable doctrine concerning faith, which swarms with enormous falsities. It was also disclosed in what manner other priests were employed to destroy that work, 369, which also brought it to pass that it was utterly rejected, when yet those things are from the Lord out of heaven. All those priests were brought together, and judged according to their doctrine and their life according thereto. 6102. The Moravians. They, i.e. the Moravians, told some of these that they acknowledged the Lord's divine, but they were then compelled to lay open the thoughts of their heart, lest they should deceive by lies. And then they openly declared that the Lord's divine is nothing different from the divine that exists with other men who are in faith toward the Father, and that he was quite an ignorant man, and more ignorant than many of their number. And that they no more believe the things he spoke than those said by any other ignorant man, and that they do not pay any regard to his words in the evangelists. Also, that he was born of Mary from Joseph as father, and that those things which are narrated in Luke are fictions. They further declared that God the Father was not satisfied with him, because he, i.e. the Lord, said men should have faith in him. But, yet, that he was called his Son because he suffered the cross, besides many more things of a scandalous nature. 6103. Some things about the English, and about adulteries. There was a town of English population, a notable one, at a certain elevation a little to the left, which was admonished to recede from faith alone and everything of the influx of heaven therefrom, which their preachers held. But the preachers prevailed, consequently they were unwilling to recede. Wherefore, those who did recede were removed thence, and afterwards their town, with the inhabitants, sank down to a very great depth. Afterwards, a great purification took place among the English in their societies, and, then, all those who committed adulteries from wantonness were cast down into hells. I then saw many of the more eminent ones of them, who are called lords, who took away the beautiful wives of others, from their husbands, to their own possessions, which are called estates. And there committed adultery with them, some for a month, some for half a year, and afterwards let them go. I saw many of these cast into hell. It was said that such villainy is common among the richer of them. And they related to me many things, which it is not permitted to divulge, respecting that matter and, also, that thus those women are discarded by their husbands, and become prostitutes. And that it all occurs for the most part with the consent, or connivance, of the husband, by reason of the desire of gain. They wish to behave similarly in the spiritual world. But they are then severely punished if they attempt it, and if they commit it, are cast down into hell. Over 100 such lords were seen at that time and place. It was stated that they do this with wives, but not with other women, for they call them whores, wherefore, it is adultery. 6104. The English doctrine of faith. Many priests were called together, and divided, and the simple-minded ones removed. The learned ones were then asked what was the nature of their faith, and they said that faith produces charity, or good works, but through the Holy Spirit. That when man feels that operation, and, from a perception of the operation by the Holy Spirit, does good, then that is good. But if he does not perceive it, and does good, then, if he does it rightly, it may indeed be called good, but yet it derives from man the quality that there is merit in it, also, that this, only, moves the will. Being asked whether men can receive faith at the hour of death, if they have not done so before, they said that faith can accomplish this, but they know not how. 6105. Charity towards the neighbor. Charity towards the neighbor, in a specific sense, is to perform the employment, business, and work, which belong to one's calling, faithfully, sincerely and justly. The reason is, because this is a man's daily occupation, the very activity and delight of his life. When, therefore, a man performs this sincerely and justly, his life becomes such, thus becomes a certain charity, in its place and degree. This may be compared to a germ, then, from this as the essential, the rest, which are called the signs, benevolences and obligations of charity, proceed and derive their essence, for they flow from his life, which, in this case, is charity. And, without that essence, even though he have the signs of charity, which are acts of piety and the like, though he have its benevolences, which are giving to the poor, and similar things, though he have its obligations, which are such things as are his duties at home and outside his home, then, all these are like a shell without a kernel. It is different when he has the germ and essence already described. Moreover, such a one does good to the community, and does good to the individuals in the community in their degree. Hence, from the community there flows to him delight of life and every necessary. This obtains in heaven, and in the societies there. For everyone is a part in the common body. From performing his work sincerely and justly, he becomes a worthy part in the common body. For everyone in a society must be in some work. Works produce the communion, and cause all things to be held in connection. For works contain in them all things human. Wherefore, even in hell they must be in works. Take, for example, kings, magistrates, priests, judges, tradesmen, artisans, farmers. 6106. Marriage. On several occasions, there was with me a woman who said, and believed, that it is impossible to love one's married partner for long, for the reason that it becomes a usual thing, and is constantly permitted. But she received answer that, in heaven, where there are no adulteries, for they are abominated, that very usualness becomes delightful, and that they love the married partner because it is always permitted. And because the deliciousness of heaven enters at such times. That such a feeling of ordinariness towards a wife takes place is known to adulterers. Wherefore, in order that that sense of ordinariness may be removed, and the lasciviousness of adultery occur, they wish the wife to refuse, indeed, to deny that she likes it, and to resist. And then, out of the ordinariness there arises, as it were the lasciviousness of adultery. Indeed, some who have pleasure in rapes, and consequently in an unlawful state, wish that, the wives, should fight against the husbands, and run away, and that the husband should violently force her, and tear her dress, she still resisting. The women, in such a case, may be compared to cats, which thus fight, scream out, and run away, whereby potency is excited in the male cat, and then the female cat yields herself captive. I made inquiries of spirits newly arrived from the world, who did not regard lasciviousness as sin, all of whom, nevertheless, when they enter the world of spirits, desired to go to heaven, and said that in hell it is allowed to commit whoredom and adultery, but it is not allowed in heaven, but only to love the married partner, and live with her to eternity, and never to put her away. I asked whether they would more willingly be in heaven or in hell. I asked over 100, and never received a reply from one of such a quality. As respects the state of those who are in hells, under judges, it is, that, in a separate chamber, behind the males, are some who had been women. It was permitted to the men to conjoin to themselves any one of these, and have her for their woman. But it was not permitted to do so with any others of them there, thus to commit promiscuous whoredom. There exist hells filled with harlots, into which newcomers enter, and commit whoredom to satiety. They are punished by various filthy diseases there, and on that account they refrain. There are infamous societies there, where harlots and adulterers resort. There are gatherings where harlots, every night, choose themselves males, they are not gatherings where males choose themselves harlots. The harlots there are able, by means of fantasies, to render themselves beautiful. Harlots who excel in ingenuity are called sirens, they appear like mice. There are the larger kinds, 370 there, and the smaller kinds there. Wherefore, such females are set over them as hold them in obedience, and compel them to labor. These fly from cats, like mice and dormice. Some, there, are cats. 6107. Moses, who was seen. Jews entreated of the Lord that Moses might be shown to them. He was, therefore, seen. He was at that time in his own place, below, where the ancients are in a tranquil state. He also came to me, and I spoke with him. He was a grave man. He said that he appeared to himself to be a man of about 50 years of age, although in the world he had been 120 years, also, that he has with him his 5 books, and also the Old Testament word. I asked him about the book Jasher. He said that he has seen it, and he told me that that word still exists with the ancients of his day, and is read, also, that he knows something about the succeeding word 371 which exists at this day, but does not read it. I recited some of those things which he had written concerning certain ones in the 5 books, and he acknowledged them all, just as though they were present to him. 1764, December 3. 6108. The two prophets in Revelation 11. A remarkable change took place in the spiritual world. There was a gathering of persons, consisting for the most part of those who were in faith alone, both above, and at the side, and beneath me. And the power of flowing into my brain was granted them. Thereupon, I became so that I was not able to raise my head, and this for 3.5 days. And it seemed to those who were in the city, which they had called Jerusalem, as if I were dead in the street. They looked, and rejoiced. But afterwards, that city, and all who were of that faith alone, were dissolved, and the inhabitants dispatched to their own places. 6109. Those who constitute the soles of the feet, and those who are under them. It was granted me to see those who constitute the nails, who are those who praise and blame without understanding, yet are not evil. Those who constitute the right sole near the great toe, make lucifer matches, 372, and by their art cause them to shine indoors. From these they have light in their rooms. Those who constitute the middle of the sole, make beautiful parchments, which they sell, out of which the people make smart little purses. 373. Those who constitute the heel, make tallow lights, 374, which they sell, those who dwell there use these for candles. They are able to make lamps, which last almost forever, and some which do not last so long. Their light is that of candles. Those who are under the sole of the foot, are scandalmongers. They seek, or ferret out news, everywhere, and relate it to others. Their communication is with those things which are in the top of the brain. I felt the communication. They are very numerous. I heard those who constitute the nails, singing, or in their way confessing the Lord, and also those who are under the nails, and they are beloved by all. Gifts were presented to them which they carried back to their companions. 6110. Various particulars relating to marriage and adultery. In what manner a female is born in innocence and in what way a male. How the female becomes the affection of good, and the male the understanding of truth. In what way the female becomes the affection of truth, which occurs when she desires to marry. Also in what way the male becomes the understanding of truth, which also then happens, when he wishes to love the female sex. 1. How this next increases, with each, till marriage takes place. And how the understanding of truth then controls the affection of truth, and they are united. 2. What the feminine is, and what the masculine, interiorly. The feminine, interiorly, is to love the husband tenderly, but they desire the husband to be ignorant of this, thus, he governs, and those who are not in the ability of doing so, become impotent. The wives of the angels said that I must not disclose this, but I said I would reveal it. This was because they supposed that this was their weakness, but it is the very good of truth and truth of good. 3. How two married partners become one form of love through conjugal love. From the uniting of minds results the form of the bodies. The forms of men, according to affections and understanding thence, or the things of love and the things of wisdom thence. This is the image and likeness of God, Genesis 1:26. Potency goes on increasing until it becomes perpetual. 4. Many reasons why a man wishes the woman to refuse. With some it is the lust of violating, with some it is the result of adultery, with some it is the excitation of potency thereby. It is from various causes, and especially from mental ones. They at length become like cats, which tear each other, stand still, gaze at one another, howl miserably, and wish to do it by stealth. The women are furious that this is disclosed. They declare, as if from interior will, that they do not desire it. The reason is, because potency vanishes if they do otherwise. 5. The mere conclusion in the mind, that adultery is not sin, renders a man an adulterer. Shown, from those things which have been said on this subject in the doctrine of life. 375. Every conclusion in the mind constitutes endeavor in the body, which is the essential act. I inquired, respecting cats, why they possess such a nature as they do. It was stated, that, with the female cat, the pleasure of fighting is first excited, and that this is observed by the male cat, and, when this passes off, copulation takes place. 6. I told adulterers, that, in heaven, there is perpetual potency. And they said, if they had known this in the world, they would never have committed whoredom, so that they might come into heaven. But I said, that, in heaven, it is permitted to love only the married partner, in hell to commit whoredom at pleasure. And I asked, whether, in this case, they would wish to be in hell, or in heaven, but I was unable to extort a reply from them. 7. If a man concentrates his love upon his wife, by shunning adultery as sin, then love with its potency increases daily, but if men take from that love and consume it with harlots, conjugal love becomes like chaff, and dies. 8. I mentioned, about a woman, that she said, that it is impossible to love one's wife, because it becomes usual. But the angels said that she is mistaken. And that what is usual, when love is truly conjugal, is the plane in which enjoyments form themselves, from within, as upon a rose bed. And that every separate rose becomes a plane in which interior enjoyments are formed and variegated, and this to eternity. 9. Fury as it were inflames infernals, when they become sensible of the sphere of conjugal love, from much experience. 10. Married partners together, or conjugal love, is the very image and likeness of God, adultery destroys it. 11. Hell is infuriated when those there perceive the sphere of conjugal love, from experience, as it were, out of heaven. 12. When adultery is thought permissible, it exists in endeavor in the whole body. 13. Every man is some affection in a form, if a charity, he is in an angelic form, the kind of affections he then has are lambs and doves. 14. Marriage is like the marriage of the will and understanding, or of affection and thought, in all and every single thing, because it is, the union, of good and truth. The conjunction, or marriage, of these, may be illustrated by the marriage of sound and speech, in which it may be clearly seen. As speech is the form of sound, so man may be described as the form of the wife, they are one flesh. A man shall cleave to his wife, the wife is the man's soul, and life, or is the heart of the man. But neither knows anything else than that the other is his, or hers, and that each is the other's reciprocally and mutually. 15. The nerves are softer in women, the veins somewhat wider, and the arteries stronger, than, in men, the hips broader, because the hips signify conjugal love, see Arcana Coelestia. 16. Unless eternity, or eternal conjunction, be thought of, a woman is not a wife, but a concubine, and from the lack of the idea of eternity, conjugal love perishes. 17. The bond must be on this side and on that, or forward and back. If not, there is no conjugal love. The bond, on this side and that, is, that the wife's affection be in the man's understanding, and the man's understanding be in the wife. And, nevertheless, it does not become eternal. If angelic spirits speak of these two things in the world of spirits, the hells are agitated, and those who are leagued with the hells are as if infuriated. 18. In heaven, the wife is spiritual heat, and the husband spiritual light. 19. A beautiful celestial and spiritual woman is beauty itself, or the form of beauty and of good. From the Lord, as regards every created work in the universe, it is manifest that there does not exist anything more beautiful than a virgin. 20. How the husband's life enters the wife, through the thighs, and by means of love. How truth then becomes good, or understanding, the will of the wife, and how, finally, the husband's understanding becomes the form of the wife's affection. Thus, how it is to be understood that the wife was formed from Adam's rib, and that Adam said, bone of my bone, and flesh of my flesh, also, that they shall become one flesh, and that a man shall cleave to his wife. 21. The delight of rape, the hell of those in that delight is cadaverous, why dash? The delight of deflowering, the quality of whoredom. What kind of delight the delight of variety is, those in it become like male mice. What, and of what sort, is the pleasure of committing adultery with the wife of another? Of what nature the pleasure of fornication with a man who has a wife, is. The pleasure of having a concubine before marriage, of what nature it is, that it is permitted, how, and to whom. 22. Conjugal love is innocence itself, from the case of Adam. It is chastity itself, and purity itself, from its origin, and from correspondence, from its playfulness like that of children. A representation, thereof, in grubs, when they become butterflies. 23. Laws of divorce. 1. Whoredom. 2. Desertion. 3. Diseases, etc. Why it is not allowable to take a divorced woman, or one irregularly cast off. 24. From chaste conjugal love, a wife and a virgin have beauty, and a man wisdom. 25. There is no lasciviousness in conjugal love, for lasciviousness is unchaste. There is the identical sensation with those who are in conjugal love, consequently, there is nothing unclean, but pure. It appears as if there were, but yet there is not. The reason is, because inwardly in conjugal love, even to the ultimates, is heaven, and inwardly in the love of adultery is hell. And the ultimates of each appear similar, as to their delights, but yet they are not. The difference is not perceived except by conjugal love. 26. It was said by the ancients, that like seeming delights were signified by Cerberus, who stands at the entrance and keeps watch, lest the delight of heavenly love descend into hell. 27. Conjugal love looks continually to two being one, or one flesh. If conjugal love do not look to this, the love, is the love of adultery. They, i.e. a man and wife, are able to become one, more and more, to eternity. 28. A male child is truth from good in the natural man. This truth is born from the good of the spiritual man in the natural man, but it is from the marriage of good and truth in the spiritual man. Hence daughters and sons are goods and truths in the natural man, see Apocalypse revealed, n. 543, see, also, respecting primogeniture. 29. Of what kind the love of inmost friendship is among them. The inmost of friendship is continual, and constitutes the heavenly delight of companionship. The distinction of that love from the love of conjunction. Of what nature the difference is. This difference is not known to adulterers, they instantly believe that the wife desires conjunction, when she says that she loves her husband. 30. It was related out of heaven, that the most ancients, who were celestial, called conjugal love the chief of all loves, and the very delight of life, and, said, that love towards children is the nearest derivation from it. 31. Of what character love towards children, which is storage, is with the evil, they see themselves in them, since the soul of the Father is in them. This love conjoins married partners, but in what way, and with what difference? 32. A female becomes a female after death, and a male becomes a male, and mutual and reciprocal love remains. For which reason, it cannot be otherwise than that this, love, remains. 33. There is sometimes an investigation by angels, previous to a betrothing, as to whether there exists the reciprocal of love. If not, they recognize the fact of themselves, and this is from the Lord. Festivities occur when marriages take place, but with a difference according to societies. 34. What supremacy affects in marriage either by the man or the woman. What the submission is that arises from hyperconscientiousness. What that which arises from excessive simplicity, in him, or in her, what the persuasion, or belief, that whoredom is not sin, affects. 35. The infernal marriage, with those who are in the love of ruling and are atheists. On the part of the man there is deadly hatred. But, still, he is manifestly the servant and slave of the wife, so that he dares not murmur against her will, but, this, when she, by various means, has obtained the ascendancy. The reason is, because the man's understanding is subjugated. 36. These have no interior virtue and honor, consequently, such a one, is not a man. The adulterer is unjust, unfaithful, insincere, an iniquitous violator of a covenant, lying, shameless. He has no interior justice or interior fidelity, no interior sincerity, interior truth, interior shame, thus, no honor nor interior virtue. What such a one is interiorly, and what such a one is exteriorly, such, then, is the man. 37. Truth is from good, through which is the church, and good is from the Lord. And since the Lord inflows through good into truth, therefore angels, and men in the churches, receive the Lord's good and truths, hence is the marriage of good and truth in angel and man. 38. If a man decides that adultery is not a sin, he is an adulterer, for the conclusion is from the will and the understanding together, there is also intention in it. Hence is interior will, which is effort, which effort reigns in the whole man. The nature of effort. 39. The conjunction of good and truth takes place because the Lord looks on man in the forehead, and man at the Lord through the eyes. The forehead is the love of the will, or good. And the eyes are the understanding, consequently truth. It is on this account that it is said that man is a recipient of love in wisdom, or of good in truth. All the angels turn the face to the Lord. The reigning love turns all to itself, and they follow it. 40. Man's spirit cooperates in the sexual embrace, because the spiritual in its first origin is sown forth. Nevertheless, man's spirit inflows into the natural. In man's spirit, the inmost is the conjunction of good and truth, or of delight, which imitates good, and of propriety, which imitates truth. Therefore, when angels and spirits embrace, it takes place in a similar manner. They conceive and bring forth nothing but those things which are of love and wisdom, for no prolification occurs, apart from the natural. 41. All concupiscences of evil spring from adultery, for that is their very form. The adulterer is confirmed by its being permitted. Which, also, brings it about that he is not able to acknowledge God in heart, nor to be conjoined with the Lord, consequently neither with heaven, because his delight is entirely opposed to spiritual delight. At length he becomes in the highest degree sensual, corporeal and material, and thinks and speaks from the things visible to the eye and the things received by the ear, which alone he stores in the memory. 42. Affection is the all of thought, just as sound is the all of speech, from this it may be known that man is such as his affection. By that single rule, it may be known what thought is in its essence and life, and what chaste thought is, and unchaste, and whence. 43. What in sound is of concupiscence, and what from sound. Man in the world knows but little what is in sounds. But angels know perfectly. 44. Love of the married partner does not result from the sexual embrace, as with adulterers, but the sexual embrace from the love of the partner. So that the love of the partner does not depend on the fire of that organ, but the reverse. The love of the partner is full of delights, irrespective of sexual intercourse, and is a delightful dwelling together. Between that love apart from the sexual embrace, and the sexual embrace itself, there is a determination, just as there is between that which a man thinks from the will, which is intention, and act, or speech. Between these, intervenes determination, which is as it were the opening of the mind to doing a thing, like the opening of a door. 45. Why it is not allowed to contract matrimony between certain relations of consanguinity. What is the punishment, from Leviticus? 46. In the next place, the reasons why fornication dissolves marriages. Why it is not lawful to marry a divorced woman. How the case is with marriage between persons of different religion. 47. The papists prefer celibacy and virginity to matrimony, but it is on account of monks and nuns in monasteries. It is pernicious. 48. Many descriptions are to be given of the state of conjugal love prior to the state in which the effect is. The prior state ought altogether to precede marriage, and love from that, without thought of the state following. Then, marriage is happy and lasting, but, so far as it partakes of the posterior state alone, so far is it lacking. I heard certain ones saying that they do not know anything of the state following. Nor did they think about it when they desired a wife, and saw her. Such is the state of maidens. Such is the chaste state. 49. Show, from experience that the delights of the earlier state are indefinite. They approach closely and more closely to the state following, but yet do not enter it. It appears as if they open it, but yet it is not so. Between the earlier and the later state, there intervenes something which is to be called determination, almost like what occurs between thinking and willing. The later state contains in itself the whole of the earlier, and all its delights. Also, the delights of that are likewise indefinite. The prior state is the state of conjugal friendship, which surpasses all friendship. 50. With whom the earlier state exists separate from the later, and with whom both. With whom it does not exist. 51. What joint potency those enjoy, who, together and separately, are in the earlier state, and what those who are in the later state only. 52. Virgins who have imbibed piety to the extent of a certain melancholy, become peevish wives, nor can they be among the happy in heaven, from experience, consequently, those who have lived in monasteries. 53. Of what character is the body of a married man, and of what character the body of a married woman, as compared with their bodies in the earlier state, or previous to the desire for marriage, as compared with adulterers and adulteresses? As compared with the bodies of young men, of adults, and of old men. Of what quality the same are as regards mind, or as regards spirit. 54. They enjoy delights and pleasures by the mere touch of hands and of lips, when they think from love, such things from the word, from objects, from various concordant delights, as are applicable. They have exquisite sensations of their separate, and of their common, states. These arise from the delights of affection and thought, and of the conjunction thereof, and the sensation is the more exquisite as the conjunction is more interior. That there is such delight from the conjunction of female and male, is because there is such, from that, of good and truth. There are still more delights of conjunction of the external senses, as of sight, of hearing, of smell. Particularly of the respiration, in which innumerable things lie concealed, they lie concealed especially in the sound itself of the speech. 55. Various fears on the wife's account, as, for example, 1. Lest she prove barren. 2. Lest, from disdain, she prove, of unsound mind, or silly. 3. A cause of disquiet. 4. By reason of quarrels. 5. From various causes in oneself, also from various causes in the wife, as, that she must have an allowance, as in Holland. That she must be well treated at home, that she must eat and drink well, for example, when she is sick, and this appears like loving the wife, but it is not the fear of the wife, but it is fear on account of the wife. But the fear of conjugal love is lest the wife be injured by any evil, or disgrace. In a word, he fears to do her harm because he loves her. This fear is the fear of the wife, and not fear on account of the wife. 56. Various despisings on the wife's account. Various enmities and hatreds on account of the wife, from various reasons. Various antipathies on the wife's account. 57. Appendix. It may be confirmed that light is darkness, and darkness light, from the fact that if man had eyes like an owl, it would be so to him. It may be confirmed that the confirmation of falsity corresponds to that light. 58. The confirmation that adultery is allowable, may be compared to the confirmation that light is darkness and darkness light. 59. Marriage, in a divine sense, is the marriage of love and wisdom in God, which were one, because the love is of wisdom, and the wisdom of love. Hence is, the marriage love, of the Lord and the Church, which love is reciprocal, according to the Lord's words. From this is the marriage of good and truth. Show, how. The marriage is reciprocal, but it is of good. And this marriage is in image and in likeness, in the marriage of two who are conjoined by love truly conjugal. 60. A man is born to be truth, and a wife, to be good. He turns himself, concerning which turning. Man's nature at birth. And woman's nature at birth. You may see what boys are, see, also, what girls are. 61. Love truly conjugal is, at the beginning, like as man being reformed, and afterwards regenerated. It inverts itself. And, when it has inverted itself, the man's love proceeds from the wife's love, and as is the latter such is the former. In like manner is circumstanced the conjunction of good and truth, in beginning, in progression, and in end. And this is, that a man shall cleave to his wife. Then the affection of good does the first things. In the earlier state, also, there is lasciviousness. The nature of the later state. 62. The reason why all desire to boast that they are powerful, and that they are esteemed, and also to be believed to be strong, etc., soldiers in particular. 63. How the seed is distributed through the body in all directions, is received by the soul, anima, which is in the whole body, thus in the fibers and vessels everywhere, and then delights, gives pleasure to the wife, and fills with delight winky face. And thus is she formed into the form of the man. This is, bone and flesh of my bone and flesh. How it produces intelligence in him, and how it produces impregnation. 64. It is allowable to love a pregnant wife. The reasons are numerous. The arguments against it apply to the weakly, also during impotence and, in case of, adulteries. 65. Christian spirits cannot endure the spiritual sphere of the feminine and the masculine. They cannot endure the spiritual sphere of conjugal love. And the hells, at such times, are roused to fury. They cannot endure the sphere of nakedness between married partners, and, at such times, flee away. They cannot endure any sphere of love from a married partner. They loathe the sphere of customary, intercourse, that is, when conjunction with the wife becomes ordinary, or freely permitted, it produces nausea. 66. Adultery with another's wife destroys all the delight of life between husband and wife, and induces dislike of the other, and also destroys care for the children, that is, a mother's and a father's care. At the same time, it leads to separation. It destroys the conjugal. The adulterer does not see this, unless he thinks about his own wife, if any adulterer should defile her. 67. Evil spirits cannot at all bear the idea, and consequently the spiritual sphere, of the feminine nature. They cry out as if tortured, and flee away, from experience, but they can endure it when it is veiled under the sphere, or idea, of adultery. 68. The purest touch causes the interiors, which are the seed, to be called forth. It goes to the inmosts in the body, and into the liquids, into the animal spirits, or into the spiritual parts, themselves, hence prolification. There is also, at that time, a communication of the inmosts, with, the outermosts. Thus, it is from firsts through lasts. 69. The excitation of adultery is external, from lust, from the touch of the bodies, especially of the parts of generation. It is external, just as one touches a friend with a feather, and tickles him. It is called external because there is no feeling in a feather. But with those who are in conjugal love, the delights of that love are communicated, which are the wife's when they are the husband's. The wife's delight flows into the feeling of the husband, so that the very sensations and delights are mutually and alternately communicated. Thus lascivious love is altogether different from conjugal love. 70. Conjugal love does not exist save with man. The reasons. The nature of the analogous love with beasts. 71. About the English, the lords, who entice the beautiful wives of others to themselves, by means of money, and live together with them for months, and afterwards send them back. These do similarly, in the other life. And those who entice to themselves the wives of others are at once exposed, and are severely punished. 72. They are punished with the punishment of rending, which is among the severest of all. They said, that, after punishment, they do not know whether their limbs hold together, and they lie a long time in bed. Also, if they do not desist, they are cast down into hell. They who desisted in the world, because it is a sin, desist in the other life, and those who desisted for other reasons, do not desist. 73. On the 29th day of April, 1765, I saw removed out of society's English lords, who, in the world, enticed the beautiful wives of others, and lived with them, until they were no longer pleasing to them. There was a multitude. They were separated from the societies, and let down to lower places, to be examined as to whether they had ever performed repentance afterwards, and had believed it to be contrary to the divine laws. 74. Respecting circumcision, it was a representative that sensual corporeal love, which is self-love, must be removed. Why it was done with stone knives, because truths remove evils. Why abolished? For what reason, when the sons of Israel entered the land of Canaan, by which is signified the spiritual church, they were again circumcised. 75. The majority say, that, when the delight of marriage becomes customary, it becomes worthless, and as it were vanishes away. It is otherwise with those who are in conjugal love. With them, the habitual experience becomes the plane of interior delights, comparatively like a flower bed, because it is the external. With those who are in lascivious love, the interiors, which are lascivious, depart with the potency, and hence arises cold, in consequence of which the general plane as it were dies. 76. With those with whom marriage is lascivious, also with adulterers, with whom the woman's love is not communicated to the man's proprial affection then causes this. Man has a proprial affection which does not make one with the woman's affection, wherefore, both recede. 77. It is that affection which produces this, but it is quickly consumed and burned up. It is otherwise when the woman's affection flows into the man's understanding, as happens with the angels of heaven, from this cause they have intelligence in their life. 78. Respecting whoredom in Paul, 1 Corinthians 6 verses 15 to 19, 7:4, read Fs. 5:28-33, where marriage is compared with Christ and the Church. 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 3 and 4. 79. Marriages are seed plots of men, and thus seed plots of heaven. 80. The marriage of evil and falsity originates from the marriage of good and truth through the influx of good and truth, and of heaven, and, then, by inversion, respecting which, experiences are to be related. But, show, what this is, as it exists with adulterers. The evil man feels evil as good, and falsity as truth. Hence, also, such are among serpents, basilisks, mice, owls, screech owls, tigers. 81. All things may be reduced to a marriage. Therefore, the not good and truth may exist together, but not the truth of good and the falsity of evil, the falsity not of evil, can, by means of ideas, be turned to somewhat good. 82. If beauty only, and not good, conjoins, it is adultery. This, also, is not human, except so far as it is believed that the beauty is from good, which is the very esse of beauty. That goodness also appears in the face is known from merely natural science. The nature of horror in genuine conjugal love, and in not genuine. The nature of fear, in those two.